So guys, it's 30 seconds still online.
Okay.
Nee, niet.
We have a joke.
Hello, I'm happy to welcome you to the 17th International Human Rights Documentary Film Festival, Docudays UA, and the first ever Docudays UA Festival online due to well-known circumstances. So we are inventing and adapting new formats, and one of them already familiar to a lot of you is Soup with Directors, which we hold each day, 1 p.m. Kiev time, when we talk with film directors whose films are presented and can be viewed at Docudays UA website, docuspace.org, for those who are located in Ukraine. And yesterday we've got the first Soup with Directors, today the second. Just to remind you, I beg your pardon, this is not what you might thinking. Just to remind you that the festival continues until the 3rd of May, and this year films are not only online but they are free to watch, which is also new and nice thing. Just please remember that some of the films, not the majority and not all of them, but some of the films have limited number of views, and Ukrainian films can be watched each for one day. Only the schedule is on the top of the website. All our events are online on different platforms in Ukrainian language. You can watch and hear them at docudays.ua website and on Facebook. And in English you can watch and hear them on YouTube. And it's not limited to Ukraine geographically. And you can leave your questions or comments there during our online sessions, and we will pass the questions to our guests and our colleagues whom we are talking to at this particular event. So this time Soup with Directors is concerned with a very important topic nowadays. We've decided to dub it How Not to Be Afraid, talk on solidarity, and we are happy to talk with two film directors from the Netherlands currently. One is Petr. Hello, Petr. I hope you can hear us. Hello.
Hear you fine. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. And Petr's film Angels on Diamond Street can be viewed online in the Docu section. And our another guest is Nina Karim van Oort. Hello, Nina. How are you today?
Hi.
Hi.
Hello.
And Nina's film, A Club Called Willpower, can be watched in the section Docu Short. Also, I'd like to remind that as at every festival, you can vote for films you like. Just go to the website with films and you will see the stars there. You can rate the film according to your liking. And also you can leave online video question to a film director, and we'll be passing it to them and they will be able to answer. So these two films we're talking about today and on broader related issues are set in different geographic locations. Angels on Diamond Street, it's North Philadelphia, it's the United States, while A Club Called Willpower is the Netherlands. Oh, Petr had appropriate background behind him. Because some of you might have watched these films already, but most of you, I presume, will be able to do that in coming days. Just please, Petr and Nina, a few words how these stories actually came. Oh, Nina is in the space now, in the sky, with diamonds appropriately. How these situations came to your attention? Is it you were looking for something of this kind, or you just learned about the Church of Advocate, which is the main location for Angels on Diamond Street, and the club called Willpower from someone and decided it's worth making a film? Probably Nina, if you can start answering first.
How I found the location, you mean? Why it was set there?
How you've learned about this club and decided to make a film about it?
I was doing a small commission work for a small organization that wants to highlight musical like things that are happening around music in neighborhoods that have a lot of difficulties, that have a lot of problems. And then I entered this building of the clubhouse, and it's funny because it's kind of a degraded building without any windows, so it's very hard to see what's happening inside if you don't enter. And I completely fell in love with the place and with the people when I entered. So you enter this sort of new realm, new universe when you go in there. So then it was this first moment, really like the first 5 minutes, that I thought, okay, this needs to be a film, this needs to be bigger.
Wow. Okay, but so it started with music, and then you were hypnotized by the venue itself. And Petr, how did you learn about the soup kitchen at the Church of Advocate on Diamond Street? And how did you decide to make this film?
Yeah, thanks, Maksym. Thanks, first of all. We're delighted that we can be back, at least virtually, at Docudays. You have such a lovely festival, and we watched it grow over the years. It's one of the best ones on the circuit now. So congratulations to you, and I'm sorry we can't be there in person.
Yeah,
but and particularly, the main reason I'm sad is because you have these extraordinary audiences, so full of young, dedicated people, So there was such wonderful energy that you get by coming to your festival. So that's harder online, but anyway, so we are. But I've been making human rights films for 15 years. I work together now with my partner, Karim. She says hello to virtually. And so that's what we work on. We work on subjects of injustice. It doesn't really matter where it is. We don't really believe in borders, so it's just stories. And one of my best friends lives in Philadelphia, so he told us about this new sanctuary movement six years ago already, and it's the idea that there are no borders and everybody's welcome. That's where this idea of sanctuary came from, which is the last resort to protect the illegal immigrant in the U.S. because churches are seen as basically still places where the ICE, the immigration authorities, won't go inside. Not that it's a law, but it's kind of a tacit agreement. So, or a memorandum of understanding, actually, that was written under Obama. So, so he told me about this organization, and we went to visit them in Philadelphia. I made a very bad joke. This was before Trump was elected. They didn't have much to do. I said, "Oh, if Trump happens to get elected, I guess you'll be busy." Bad joke. And then the subject kind of stayed with us. The idea of sanctuary, and then my friend sent me a newspaper article about Carmela, the protagonist who anchors the film. I guess 3 years ago now, almost. And so I went to Philadelphia with no expectations. I just booked the ticket and went over to see, well, what would this story be like? And then when I came to the setting, which was at the Church of the Advocate, it was extraordinary. Because first of all, it's fascinating because it's a Hispanic story, right? A mom from Mexico, undocumented mom of 4 kids, who's asked the church for asylum. And traditionally, these two communities don't mix in the U.S. So there's a lot of prejudices, stereotypes, and not understanding between them. Traditionally, they say. And then you go into this church, and it has this amazing history because it was a real activist church going back really a long time since it was founded, but particularly in the 60s in the civil rights movement. So you're in this place, and it's like, oh gosh. And then I met these extraordinary women there who are working there, trying to do good. So it's like, how could you not make a film about this? So that's how it evolved. And then we followed the story for about a year, and most of the time is basically spending time in this soup kitchen. So that's how we built the film. It's a story of a soup kitchen that's trying to help people in this church, and then this Mexican mom gets sanctuary inside this institution. So it's the main character becomes really the church itself. And we were so inspired because we see it really as the ultimate anti-Trump film. It's like a film that it's a place where everybody's welcome, right? You know, and there's all this strong identity politics in the U.S., you know, about ethnic categories or matter and how you look at somebody and what can be done about that. But we came into this place, it's a black church, you know, we're white Europeans. It didn't matter at all. It's, you know, you're just, you know, more interesting about me, and you see it in the film, right, is that I'm tall. That's interesting. It's not that's the rest of it is like, who cares? So, and that's extraordinary as an ideal. You know, it's what the priest, Reverend Renee in the church, she says her motto is everybody has a place at the table. And that's really what they stand for. So such inspiring, special people, you know, especially in today's world.
You actually started answering my another question, but for those of our members of our audience who haven't seen this film yet, but will be able to watch it soon, just to mention that the location of the film, the venue of the film, is Church of the Advocate. It's African-American church in North Philadelphia in the US, which has a history in place in civil rights movement in the United States, and currently it is African-American, and in the film there is a soup kitchen working for poor and for hungry of the neighborhood, and at some point in time this irregular immigrant from Spanish-speaking part of America, Carmela finds sanctuary, finds asylum in the church, and is supported by the community. But this is what you were mentioning. Actually, was my question. It's really in one moment, at one moment of the film, the community members of the church pay attention to how tall you are, Petr. I was wondering if really predominantly African American church group, church community was wondering, or patrons of the church probably, were wondering what this white guy is actually doing there with the camera. And some of these people, especially patrons, are vulnerable, and this is very visible from the way they communicate. Didn't you have any moments when camera in your hands was perceived as a threat, or they felt uncomfortable? And how did you manage to build trust with them?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Yeah, this was that in that regard is one of the most challenging films I've worked on. There's always tremendous inequalities between basically the filmmaker often and the subject, and that's certainly the case, both with the patrons in the soup kitchen and also with Carmela, right? And you see her because she's in a very vulnerable place in the film, right? She can't leave the church, so she's really depressed basically most of the time, and so that was really hard. So with her in particular, you wouldn't be filming a lot of the time, and with her kids. Also was, the kids can go to school. It's a strange thing. They're able to go to school because Philadelphia is also what's called a sanctuary city. So it means the school board doesn't comply with federal law. So there's a way for the kids to go to school, but it's also dangerous. There's stories of immigration authorities picking up, not arresting the kids, but picking up the parents while they're illegal immigrant parents while they're waiting for the kids at the school bus stop. So I'd spend a lot of time playing with the kids, hanging out, trying to help the mom and not filming, things like that. So how do you gain trust of people? It's through time. And the patrons of the soup kitchen, that was pretty hard at first. I felt really uncomfortable filming at the start because you're like, well, how can you make a film so it doesn't feel like, how do you try to get rid of this inequality? Well, the simple way you do that is because it becomes a character-driven film. So you start building basically friendships with the main protagonist in the film. And we kind of got around that issue a little bit by not focusing so much on the patrons. Some of them appear in the film, but the main characters are the staff and the volunteers working there, right? Yeah. Because indeed some of and we would work around that. I mean, technically we would just make it clear who we are and through the church office too, that agree we could make the film. But at the start they'd say, well, people who don't want to be filmed, please sit at a particular table over here. And then we won't film them. But a lot of the patrons would tell me when I would be filming, say, I don't want to be filmed. So you'd say, no problem. And then people would get to know you. So, and that would change. But some people did not want to be filmed. Not at all. And that's perfectly legitimate and understandable. So,
yeah.
So the main thing also to say is particularly about this community. It's one of the poorest. I mean, Philadelphia is the 4th largest city in the U.S. and it's also the poorest one. So there's the inequalities you see in this city are just astounding, right? And so it's a very vulnerable population and basically a devastated population where in this particular neighborhood. And there's all sorts of things that are changing now because it's also next door to a university, so there's gentrification happening, which means the local population is also being pushed further out from where it's living. But to answer your story is, how do you film people so they don't feel basically exploited, right?
Especially in these settings,
basically, and especially in this, so you can work with this notion of consent, but even that's inadequate, really, because what people, and it depends. Also, in this place, it was a bit easier in a way because both Carmela had plenty of media attention, and because the church is a well-known place, there'd be plenty of journalists going through doing reportages, and the soup kitchen is quite well known because it's been there for a long time. But I'm really convinced, apart from your attitude, I really think that if you come and work in a place with an open heart, people will feel that. It's like with filmmaking, it's kind of an animal instinct thing. Is you just know if you can feel if someone's basically dangerous or not, or if they're going to be your friend, and that's what you aspire to. But practically, the best way to do it is through time. If you invest the time, people are at first they're even a little bit confused. It's like, why are you still here? What are you doing here? And then it's kind of like, oh, that's your work, and oh, okay. And then it turns into, oh, you're actually serious about what you're doing. And so it's a process like that, like any relationship in life. It takes really time to build trust.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah.
Well, it's a great question. Yeah, and it's particularly it's one that never goes away with filmmaking, right? Particularly human rights filmmaking. So yeah,
that's true. From time to time, I'll be checking my phone. It's not because I'm disinterested, but because this is the device where I'll get comments or questions from members of our audience if we'll have them. And we'll talk about borders and about freedom of movement and about policies and politics a little bit later. And this is a matter specifically of my interest. Just to mention that out of Docudays, if there is a world out of Docudays UA festival, I deal with issues of refugees and asylum seekers here in Ukraine as a coordinator of non-governmental initiative No Borders project. So, you know, this is of my interest. But I would like currently to talk a bit more about basically a notion which is the title of part of the title of our talk, of our soup, which is solidarity. In your film, Petr, there is a lot of fear. Actually, this is how I perceived it. Patrons of the soup kitchen are afraid of what tomorrow will bring into their lives. They're not sure what they will have. And the staff of the soup kitchen, starting from a certain moment in time, they are not sure what will happen to their soup kitchen. And it is unclear what will happen to the church, which doesn't have funds to renovate itself. But I know it might sound a bit simplistic, but really what means they have at their disposal to tackle this fear or these worries is a common action formed by solidarity. They together assist patrons, they together provide asylum for Carmela and her children, they together try to raise funds for soup kitchen, and this is what solidarity looks like on everyday level to me. Where you feel in this, and do you think that solidarity can be a remedy for fears and worries? Petr, this is probably first to you, and then we'll go to Nina, because her characters in her film are in different but in a way similar situations.
Yeah,
but
they're both
Petr,
about closings,
yeah.
right? Closing institutions. But great question. Yeah, that's a tough one. And generally, you know, in this in our story, in the particular case of the church, there certainly is solidarity, but solidarity often also has limits, right? National ones particularly. That's certainly not the case with the church. We talked about that just a second ago. But there, it's helped out a lot by faith, of course, right? So it's not just a fellow feeling, but it's love, basically. So it's even stronger. And you see that at one point with one of the patrons who comes, she's upset and she's consoled by Mamie, the head cook of the soup kitchen, right? Makes her feel better. A woman comes in crying, she gives her a hug. And she sits down, and that's what they emphasize, that it's not just a safe place or a place where you can get something to eat, but it's also a place where you can feel at home, right? Where people will talk to you and express some kind of care. So it's a bit stronger than that even, you know, in the film. So, and it's a real U.S. based story, and that's the real particular dilemma in the U.S. You have horrific inequality, and now with the COVID virus, right? We're in touch with the soup kitchen, and they're still working. They're handing out bag lunches at the door to keep operating. But the need is growing. You see that, right? And then they've run into bigger dilemmas, is that the food is not delivered anymore because the deliveries aren't working. People aren't going to supermarkets, so there's not enough food to be thrown out. All these kinds of different problems. So, but it's a tough question you ask. The big one that now in these particular times, the worry is, of course, that national borders will become even stronger, right? So maybe, and it depends. Are you going to have solidarity within borders or not at all, right? Or is fear just going to predominate, right? And that's the challenge. So, when I talk to our friends in the film, they don't seem to be deterred by that. You know, they're still doing their job, right? Of course, religion helps, but I don't think that's necessary either. It's just kind of common decency.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not just the word fear, right? But the opposite of fear, which is hate. And that's the biggest weapon to be used these days, right? Apart from telling people to drink bleach. But yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Okay, Yeah, before switching to
But
our
I guess,
current... Mhm.
yeah. But no, obviously, and get Nina into the conversation about the closing, right? Yeah, but no, go ahead. Yeah.
Before switching to our current circumstances we find ourselves in during pandemic, to continue this talk about solidarity, probably we can ask Nina the same. Nina, in a club called Willpower, this is also a place for again, for those who haven't seen the film yet, it's set in the Netherlands and it's filmed in the community center and a music school, which is attended in one of the neighborhoods in one of the Dutch towns, which is attended by people from all over the district who are finding relief actually in communication with each other and playing in a music band. But then soon they find out that their community center, this club called Willpower, is to be demolished in the process of urbanization, redevelopment of this particular district. So I wonder, Nina, how did characters of your film cope with these worries, because through the whole film they don't know what will happen to their club, and they try to fight for it, but did they receive any support from the outside of the club, or they were closed down in their own ghetto and no one from the inhabitants of the district, for instance, wanted to support them?
Well, first I will also answer a bit on this topic of solidarity and what fear of things changing, what it can mean for a group. What I found is that somehow fear also becomes this kind of common enemy, and especially for this group of people, it was a way of shaping an identity also for them, to knowing, okay, this we all know that we don't, this would be the worst that could happen, us losing our community house, and what, yeah, who are we as a person, what do we stand for? So that's yeah, to talk about solidarity, I think this finding a common identity is super important. And then, like, okay, we will talk about it later, but like COVID-19, having this kind of, yeah, common enemy together, something that we're afraid of, that can really also make us become, yeah, stronger in our relationships to each other.
Mm-hmm.
Then about Willpower, yeah, they had, especially when I was filming, so I also started, it's already been 4 years ago, but I've spent a lot of time before I started filming, because I agree that's so important. And I found that this was actually changing. They were in this process for such a long time that during the filming they didn't get any support from the municipality. And it's also in the film, there's this moment that they kind of open their doors and invite all the political parties to come, and nobody shows up.
Yeah, nobody shows up.
Nobody shows up, and they're making incredible music, and nobody shows up. And yeah, that's kind of changed actually, and I think that's also quite interesting, the role of what a film can do also, because at some point the municipality also found out that I was filming this place, and then there was an article in the newspaper about it, like, okay, there will be a documentary about their fight for the community house, but the municipality isn't doing anything. And when the film premiered, it also gave this sort of buzz. So actually, because the film ends at a point that you're not sure if they're going to lose their community house, yes or no.
Exactly, this is what I was going to ask you next. Yeah, but it's unclear if they managed actually to defend their club or not at the end of the day. So what happened to it?
Well, I hope to believe that the film had played a very important role. Next to that, they also had a lot of actions that they did to show why it meant so much for them. But I also really believe that making this film, and this was actually a way, now the municipality and the parties and the different parties, they could see the film online, knowing what was happening inside of the clubhouse. So now they have now they completely shifted. So they're still in discussion, but it seems to be quite positive. More people are listening to them, and they're thinking about how to shape the future and to make
That's excellent, because well, of course, they realized it could be quite a bad publicity for them if they do not at least discuss the future of the club. But the club members, there is this moment when they have a group discussion. They sit in a circle and they talk how much this club means for them. And actually, they are saying that they were never nowhere appreciated for who they are. Some of them have medical issues, and some of them have mental conditions, and some of them have speech problems or something else. And suddenly they found this club where they are taken for who they are, and they feel comfortable. They do not fit actually elsewhere, but they really do fit in this club called Willpower. This is also a form of, they are very different. They are young and they are old, and they, as I mentioned, are in different circumstances. But is this part of also of everyday solidarity texture to take to support another person who is different from you and maybe is not very comfortable in certain aspects, but you still are in the same solidarity circle? Do you think we can be in solidarity with someone who are not like us, or maybe who are even uncomfortable for us?
Yes, of course. Yeah, I'm a real believer in that this is possible, and actually that this is also happening a lot. I just think that a lot from like above or from politics point of view, there's this very negative idea, like this isn't happening already, like people aren't open for each other, and there, of course, this is also completely true. But when I look around, I also see a lot of people that are completely different from each other, that are helping each other out, and a lot of solidarity. So I'm a strong believer that this is, that if you, especially if people show their vulnerable side, they dare to show their vulnerable side, then everybody can relate to one another.
I find myself this to be an essential part of process of solidarity, and actually it's the same for Petr's film, where African American community helps a Hispanic family, and they talk about mutual stereotyping and mutual stereotypes. And on a club called Willpower, probably because this is this lockdown in different countries, it has currently different forms due to coronavirus. In Ukraine, it's quite harsh. But in some countries of the EU, it's even harsher, as far as we know. It probably psychologically influenced me, because when I was watching the film, I took the final scene of the film that where they march across the street, along the street playing music, that they were not able to save the club, and I was really sad. I think I was influenced by current mood of our situation, but I was also thinking that we are all, to a certain extent now, under our lockdown, caged to our flats, sort of members of a club called Willpower, which is closed down. We had our circles of communication, we had our places to go to, we had our offices, or we had our bars and restaurants, which we visited, we gathered with friends, and we talked, and they were taking us for who we were, maybe not in the offices, but at least in the bars. And suddenly we cannot do it anymore. We do not have this common space, so suddenly your film really had a totally different dimension to me, not totally different, but wider and broader and more personal dimension to me. And I would like to talk, to go back probably to Petr, but before that, we have questions from members of audience. Nina, I will ask you first, and these same questions will then go to Petr. So we have, I will pack it in two. We have two questions now. First, did you have a desire to stop filming due to difficulties in the process? Did you have any difficulties which provoked, which were obstacles? And second, if there were difficulties, which methods brought your inspiration back to you? So Nina, you go first, probably with these two.
Well, I've never made a film in which there weren't any difficulties. I think that's kind of a part of the process, and I've although I'm only starting out, but I kind of understand now that that's the way that it goes, and I trust in that when I come across difficulties that it will that I will manage to kind of change them. And I think also the different processes in filmmaking are very helpful. Like you can have difficulties because you can't film something, or you wanted to film something but then it's not possible anymore. But then I really love this moment in editing also, that you have all the material and you're trying to construct this film, and you find out that you need to do something that you haven't thought of before, like change the arrange it completely different. So yeah, I don't know, it's like every part of filmmaking has its own difficulties, but they can also help each other. Maybe you think, oh, I missed that scene, now I don't have a film, and you start with the edit and you see that actually it's not really about that scene, but maybe in my case, to make it less abstract, the conversation that I had that's in the film with all the different with all the different members of the group, that was one of the first scenes that I filmed, actually, not knowing that it would be the most important scene of the film. And that's really something that I found out in the edit, how important it was and where it needed to be placed. But that's something that I couldn't think of beforehand. I thought another scene would be the biggest, like it's the end scene where they walk. Okay, so I don't know what if I'm spoiling something, but they they have a protest.
Those who've seen your film will recognize the scenes, and those who when seen it, they will be intrigued. So yeah, what scene you actually thought originally will be the most important one, I wonder?
Well, I knew they would have this protest going outside, going on the street, and for me this was the most important, because the whole film sets inside of this community building, and I wanted to, with this, them going in outside, it really felt like the first moment that they would show themselves to the world and hopefully also get a lot of supporters. But then this day, not so many people showed up. Like you said, actually after watching the film, you're not quite sure what would happen. And for me, after shooting, I thought, oh, I wanted this to be like a victory for them, showing like we are here and you can't just sweep us off of the map. But then the day was actually the opposite. And I thought, okay, maybe not such a hopeful ending. But actually in the edit, I found out that is exactly what makes it a strong scene, because then the film is not about if they're going to win their struggle, yes or no, but it's more about them being, fighting together, even if they don't have any hope for a bright future. It's about the solidarity far more than. So I didn't know that while shooting. Then I was a bit disappointed how the day was going. But then in the edit, I thought, no, this is so much better, because the film for me is so much more about this solidarity and less about making your point or winning.
Yeah. And thank you for this thought that, you know, solidarity is probably even more important when the happy ending is not only not guaranteed, but very far from it. And the same questions I would like to ask Petr. Actually, just to remind you, did you have a desire to stop filming due to difficulties? And if it was the case, which methods brought inspiration back to you, Petr?
Oh, I wonder if this, thank you for the question. I wonder if this is a question from a filmmaker or somebody who wants to make films. How hard is it? It's always hard. I can tell you, I look back, my first film was 2003. I thought, oh, it was really hard. And every film since then has been harder, so it doesn't get easier. So there's always difficulties, but that's just part of the work, also part of the pleasure. So you have good days and you have bad days. In this particular, we've discussed some of the challenges of working in the environment already, but the biggest one, I think, depends. I mean, we work in a style, we like to work in an observational cinema verite style. So you want something to happen in front of the camera. And that really involves time. So there's many days where you'll be filming, I mean, a soup kitchen is just daily routine. Nothing interesting out of the ordinary is happening that you would want to show in a film. But I compare it sometimes to going fishing, that you have to like that kind of patience. So, or maybe if this really is a filmmaker in the audience, I would say, think of yourself that you're signing up for an endurance sport. It's not like a sprint, it's more like a marathon. So you have to kind of enjoy that sort of thing. So,
by the way, can you remind me, how long did it take you to make this film?
Well, this was pretty quick film. It was, I guess, 2 years from start to finish. But and people often ask, how much material did we shoot? We shot about 90 hours, something like that.
Okay.
So the shooting rate is pretty, I mean, it drove the editor crazy, of course. And say, yeah, I want to go back to the soup kitchen and film a little more. Something important's coming, so we have to go back. But yeah, with this and particularly with this subject, it was also wanting to capture the routine of things of every day, and how do you make that interesting in a beautiful way. So you're waiting for things to happen. So, and they can be small things, but you know. So, but the issue of solidarity is such a lovely question. You know, there's one scene in our film that there's one of the patrons comes in. It's at Christmas time, and I'm talking to him about what Christmas means for him. And someone pointed, I didn't even think of interpreting this scene this way, but someone at ITFA, when the film came out, they said, oh, this is the most beautiful thing. And this person in the audience pointed out is that what Kenny, the fellow we're filming, he says, Christmas is terrible now because I have no one. Christmas is for families. And what he's lamenting is not his loneliness or the fact that he doesn't have anybody. He's not like, you know, being a victim in this way. No, to the contrary, he feels that's devastating for him because he has no one to give to. he can't be generous to anybody because he has nobody, and that's what he misses. So this kind of generosity that he wants to express, he can't express it. So maybe that's something to think about.
Yeah, yeah. And I've mentioned before
Yeah.
that there was this moment in the film, in your film, when, for instance, Carmela talks about about stereotypes she has, she's got about African American population.
Yeah.
And yep, that they not only exist, they're quite deeply rooted, but these people seem to be really happy to help each other. I mean, they are happy to help Carmela and her children, and some seem to be quite sad that she's got to leave to the other church. Why did it happen, by the way? Why did she has to leave? Why they weren't able to support her
she leaves
anymore?
to the church. To tell you the story, so Carmela asks this church for sanctuary. The church protects her for a year. She lives in a basement with her 4 kids inside, in one room basement inside the church. They turn a classroom into a home for her. And then after a year, she moves to another church. So why does that happen? It's just because what you're told in the film. It's just basically for organizational reasons. That there's 2 other families who are in sanctuary in Philadelphia, and they're in a particular neighborhood, and this organization, that's this new sanctuary movement, they think it's better for their struggle to have the families all basically in a particular neighborhood, that is better for advocacy reasons in this kind of way. There was also, but it's not in the film, there's also the reason that the priest, Reverend Renee, goes on sabbatical for 6 months. So she's worried that if she won't be around, then she won't be able to particularly personally take care of Carmel and her family to be overseeing that. So just several reasons, but yeah, about the I thought that was just absolutely fascinating. The differences between these, ethnic groups. It's like, you mean, wow, there's real, and then when people saw the film afterwards, some of the people in the church, they thought, oh gosh, we didn't know this. But and sometimes it's even stronger. I mean, and this is about filmmaking, right? You also have a duty to protect your characters. That when they say something that's not real, like what the first interview I did with some of Carmela's kids, they say, so what's the biggest thing you've learned about being here in the church, or what's it like? And one of the little 11-year-old girl blurts out, and she says, I realize that black people aren't all bad. like, wow, how about that? How about that? You're being honest about your prejudices. You're a child. So, of course, you don't put it on the film because that'd be a really mean thing to do, right? But, like, how about that? So that's the world we live in, right? Yeah.
And this is a very important lesson to learn in the first place, lessons like that.
Yeah, of course. Right.
Going back to political circumstances and possible consequences of outcomes of the situation we are in now, you started to open up this issue while talking about current pandemics and closing of the borders. One of the main lines of your film is this freedom of movement and sanctuary and asylum and community, which shows solidarity to this family in danger. But currently the borders are closed, and not only in the borders of the United States. With the United States is a separate issue since Mr. Trump has been elected president, but in Ukrainian borders are closed as well. And as a person who deals with asylum in Ukraine, I should say that according to all the information we have, the asylum applications are effectively suspended for the time of lockdown. A person who finds him or herself in Ukraine currently, being an asylum seeker or refugee, cannot apply for asylum because there is nowhere to apply to. Already there are quite a lot of forecasts that this global lockdown will have consequences, strengthening border regime, restricting freedom of movement, which is restricted for global south of humanity anyway, and more nationalism, more isolation, etc. Do you see it this way too? Do you think we have to brace ourselves to this more isolated life inside the borders of our nation states?
For me?
Yeah.
Oh, Well, let me tell you a secret. The older I get, the more naive I get, more idealistic
Wow.
I get. How about that?
Wow.
So
I envy you.
I actually see this crisis as a tremendous opportunity for everybody. And that's not to minimize all the horrible suffering that's happening in the world, but I really see it as a real opportunity for all of us to radically transform how we live together on this planet, and it's a real opportunity, right? So
Okay.
and what is the hope that actually we will do that? Minimal, but it's a real wake up call. So, and of course it's being misused. You see Mr. Trump saying, "Oh, we're not going to have any immigration now," or calling it
Yeah.
a Chinese virus. Take your pick. All the playbook is out there. How are you going to use this opportunity to make the world more miserable? But it's a real chance, right? And then we have to also remember is that I think that the virus is, in a way, is also a distraction, because the real thing that's confronting us, of course, is climate change. What we're doing to nature, right?
Yep. Yeah, this is another issue which has been brought up by pandemic as well. I mean, but
Yeah.
what do we do? What do we do with global solidarity, with transnational, transborder solidarity in lockdown and post-lockdown world? Will it need more support from grassroots level, because it does seem to be in danger to a certain extent?
Yeah, I think that's up to that's why, while we talk about your young audiences, you'd feel these wonderful people with this amazing energy. So, that's the hope. They say enough is enough. So, yeah.
Can I
Please, Nina, yeah. And please go
Yeah.
see
interfere?
Nina's,
Sure.
please
Yeah,
go
of
see
course.
Nina's film. It's really beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you. I really would love to see yours, so you have to send it to me.
Sure.
Yeah, what I wanted to contribute is what I find really interesting about this whole COVID is that we're also creating this sort of common language. It's been such a long time ago that we're all, like, everybody is sort of in the same situation, dealing with the same difficulties. Of course, you can say a lot about that statement, but I think we can see it as creating a sort of new common language that we can relate to when discussing our future and how we want our future to be. I'm also really an idealist.
You have the excuse of youth.
Yeah, that's true. But I think that's the interesting part, is that we can that young, old, left, right, rich, poor, everybody has to deal with this pandemic. And that's very interesting.
Yeah, we have a number of articles and statements and I don't know, videos on Instagram saying that it affects both rich and poor, and we have rich and powerful fallen victims of pandemic. I should say, however, that I'm quite skeptical about certain aspects of it. These are mostly rich people who post that rich and poor are affected in the same way, and poor people don't do that because they know it's not exactly true. But yes, we see people from very different walks of life speaking the same language when it comes to this global threat. But we have a question from a member of our audience which seems to be sort of an answer and a question to what you've just, Nina, said. Do you think that COVID-19 provokes more anti-solidarity, isolation and helplessness because the threat is embodied in each person, each and every single one of us? How can you build solidarity under such circumstances? I mean, it can be felt, at least in Kiev, everywhere. You watch someone walking down the street wearing a face mask, of course, thinking, is it a healthy person? Why does he or she cough? And I mean, I should stay away from him or her, probably. So what do you think? Does it provoke more anti-solidarity?
Well, I think it also does. So that's the difficult thing. I think it could go both ways. But what I do feel is that, and maybe I'm too much in my own bubble, but what I do feel is that it also brings a sort of new sort of mildness. Like a lot of people in my surroundings, I hear them showing their emotions in a. I feel like everybody is a bit more mild to one another when in this time that we're in, that people are more close to their emotions, also that they can feel afraid, that they can feel sad about the situation, and that I have the feeling that people are more freely expressing this. And so I'm a big believer that that vulnerability and showing your vulnerability is actually in the core base of meeting each other. Okay, but yeah. So to answer the question, I think it can go both ways, and I don't really have a clear answer to that. But being a very positive person, I see a lot of potential in this mildness. And in this showing of vulnerability, and I think if we can keep this up, being more honest to ourselves, what we feel, and listening better to what other people feel, I believe that there's a way that we can, resonate in more.
Yeah. We had some cases reported in Ukrainian media field, but also from elsewhere, from other countries, about quite sad stories during the pandemic when people being afraid of certain family or person which was reported being infected effectively attacked the premises where this family lived, or the gathered next to the building where some person infected with COVID-19 was found. So it looked like this irrational fear getting people together, but not for solidarity. Basically, solidarity of fear is not a solidarity to me, frankly speaking. But we've had also the opposite things, like apart from people being more kind to each other, as Nina mentioned, more mild, also there are manifestations of solidarity when people try to help each other in these difficult times, especially those who are under more constrained circumstances than the other. And I would like to, we have a couple of more questions, but I don't think we have time for them. I would suggest those of you who had questions but didn't manage to ask them now, go to the films page and record your questions there with video tool under the film. I would like to ask Petr for now a question for last 2 minutes. The same, basically, you mentioned that the soup kitchen helps the inhabitants of the district in these difficult times. So it still exists. And from your experience, these conditions we find ourselves in, did they decrease solidarity in isolated people, or they provoke increase in solidarity not only for the soup kitchen but for people globally or everywhere?
It's such a tough question. I know with our friends working at the soup kitchen, they just see it more practically. They just see it as their duty. Basically, it comes from a deeper place. They just see this is just what we do. It's not even, in a way, it's part of just who they are. It's not even like it's reflected upon as a choice. It's just this is what they do. They help people.
Wow.
So, but it's such a difficult question you're addressing. And it confronts everybody with the same. You think of basically about social distancing, right? On the other hand, someone coughs, you get scared, right? It's primitive, and you're embarrassed about it. It's like, oh my God, look, how did I react? So it's an invitation to reflect upon yourself. But at the same time, of course, it's also, by definition, expression of solidarity, because you distance yourself so you don't hurt other people, right? Or because you potentially could, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
But you're right that it affects everybody equally. On the other hand, the most vulnerable, we read now, right? 250 million of the planet are going to starve, right, because of this, because of the economic stuff. But my view is that I just think is that we're invited to really rethink structures of power and to challenge them all over the world.
Thank
in particular,
you,
when you
Petr.
say
Yeah.
like when you say the word solidarity in the U.S., nobody even uses that word, right? It's like, what's solidarity? It's an individualistic culture, and you're seeing the real limits on that now, right? And because we're all interconnected in this way, shown how vulnerable we are because we're a sickness, right?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Petr. Thank you, Nina. In these times of increased vulnerability for so many people around the world, I was really enjoying talking to you about solidarity. And I think while we are in isolation now, we are not isolated globally. We talk to each other online, and it's been a real pleasure to me. Thank you for participating in Docudays UA Film Festival. And I'm sure that after this lockdown ends, or at least pauses, we'll have to express more solidarity, because a lot of people will find themselves in more vulnerable and difficult situation, and we can survive as a community by fighting our fears and worries with solidarity. Please, our beloved member of audience who are located in Ukraine, go watch films on docuspace.org. Petr's film Angels on Diamond Street, Nina's film A Club Called Willpower, and you are able to ask questions below at the bottom of the page. And I hope Petr and Nina will be able to answer them. And yeah, stay with Docudays UA online. We'll have our hands full for the rest of the day today, and tomorrow at the same time we'll have soup with directors with my colleague, and I will hopefully see you day after tomorrow at the morning workout, another part of our program, and on 29th of April another soup with directors. And just to remind you that those of you who are located in Ukraine can vote for films of DocuWorld, DocuShort, and DocuUkraine competitions. Petr and Nina, thank you again, and I hope to see you in post-lockdown beautiful Kiev at one of the next Docudays UA Film Festival. And thanks to all our online audience. Have a safe and nice day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, Petr.